Hey, friends. Welcome to Now We're Talking with Doug Pagitt podcast. My conversation today is with Robb Ryerse. Robb is running for Congress in Arkansas as a progressive Republican. It's fantastic. He's a pastor, works in another business, and running for Congress. A citizen candidate, I'll tell you. So I'd love for you to know about Robb. We have a really, I think, great conversation about the role of politics and how it all works. And so his website is Robb with two B's, Robb2018.com, Robb2018.com. And he's part of a thing called the Brand New Congress. You'll hear him talk a little bit about it, but if you want to look that up too, brandnewcongress.org, and you'll see a list of all kinds of candidates from across the political spectrum listed there. And I know you've heard it all before, but if you appreciate the podcast and want to be a patron, a supporter, someone who contributes to making this all possible, I'd love your help over at Patreon. You can go to dougpagitt.com. You'll find the link right there. I'd love to have you chip in a bit to this whole wonderful little effort. So here it is, a November 2017 edition. Robb Ryerse, running for Congress. All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to Now We're Talking with Doug Pagitt podcast and live stream here on Facebook. And for those who are used to the regular, afternoon delight that I like to refer to as the podcast and audio stream on these November days, I'm really excited for this one. This is Robb Ryerse, and he is running for Congress in Arkansas as a Republican and as a progressive fellow. I think that's so fantastic. Everything about it, Robb, I like. I don't know if, I should out myself right away. I am a supporter, and I'm probably going to end up being a campaign donor. So I'm a shill for the Robb Ryerse, Robb2Bs2018.com effort. So congratulations on doing this. I think it's just fantastic. And tell us what you're doing running for Congress, and then after that, you can tell us why you're running as a Republican.
Yeah, thank you, Doug, for having me on. It's great to chat with you again. Appreciate the opportunity. So I'm running for Congress because, like a lot of people, in the days after the last presidential election, I kind of woke up thinking, what in the world is going on? And I had in the days following the election, I had basically the same conversation over and over again with friends of mine. Yeah. Kept saying, like, we got to do something. Like, you have to do something. And I've seen my friends get involved and do things in different ways. Some have gotten involved with indivisible groups. They're going to protest. They're writing their congresspeople and senators in ways they never have before. They're talking about politics on Facebook and Twitter in ways that they hadn't before, all to kind of raise their voice. And everybody's kind of getting involved doing something. And I'm one of those people that, as long as we're going to do something, we might as well do something big. Yeah. And so, I decided to run for Congress as a way of saying, the direction that my party's gone, the direction that the country's going is a problem, and we've got to get involved and do what we can to try to move things in a different direction.
And you've been politically engaged much of your life. This is new to you. Where do you fall on the I'm a political guy spectrum?
Yeah. I've always followed politics really closely. Uh-huh. I grew up, especially in my teenage years, very politically involved, going to like teenage Republican school for like one summer.
Oh, great!
Very, very politically involved.
What years would that have been? What years were you in high school? And
I graduated in 92, so that was probably 91.
Okay,
90 or 91.
So coming out of ththose George H.W. Bush years, post-Reagan years, early Clinton time. Okay.
Yep, for sure. Yeah. And I grew up very conservative, used to listen to Rush Limbaugh. And a little piece of trivia that, people don't know about me. I've actually been on the air with Rush Limbaugh like 5 different times in the course of my life. So,
hardly anyone's ever been on air with Rush Limbaugh. Like he runs, he doesn't do guests.
Well, no, as a caller.
Yeah. Fantastic.
Yeah. So I grew up very conservative, and but when I was in college, I kind of had this realization that I wanted to devote my life and the focus of my life to church ministry, and so became a pastor as a result of that, and have done that for the last 20 years. But just like I said, in light of the last election, the sense is that the difference that I need to make and needs to be a little bit broader than just what we're doing here with my church. And so all of this kind of coincided nicely with my wife getting ordained, and she's kind of taken the lead pastor role of our church, and that has kind of freed me up to focus on running for Congress.
So you're running in Arkansas, right? 3rd district?
Yeah, Arkansas's 3rd congressional district. Okay. It's the northwest corner of Arkansas. Most people would know it as the home of Walmart. It's where Walmart global headquarters is.
Yeah, well, I think most people wouldn't know anything about any of our states, right? Most people know about their own states, and that's about it. But okay, so it's in that northern part of Arkansas, and you are running as a progressively minded person, and as a Republican. So for a lot of people, they've bought into the notion that certain political parties and certain other factors in someone's life is what dictates whether they're a conservative or a progressive or a liberal or something. And you're willing to be both an evangelical and a Republican and progressive. And a lot of people don't know that kind of thing exists at all. Talk a bit about that. Does that exist? Are you the unicorn in this universe, or is this a real thing?
Well, no, I'm not a unicorn. I know of 6 other progressive Republicans that are running for Congress around the country. There are those of us out there.
Great.
So yeah, I'm a lifelong Republican who is kind of horrified at the direction my party's gone. And you look over the history of the Republican Party. The Republican Party used to be a party that was known for who it was for rather than who it was against. Used to be a party that put people first. Yeah. And I talk a lot about how I'm in this to help restore the Republican Party to its historic values. The Republican Party platform in 1956 included things like equal pay for women, included expanding healthcare, expanding labor unions, increasing the minimum wage. Parties change over time. Just because there's some party leaders right now who say this is Republican orthodoxy doesn't mean it has to be that way. Parties change over time, and there's no reason why the Republican Party needs to be the way it is right now. Sometimes people call me a rhino, a Republican in name only. The reality is that I've been a Republican my whole life. I'm not a Republican in name only. I'd actually make the argument that the people that have abandoned the historic values of the Republican Party, they're the actual rhinos, not those of us that are trying to restore the party to its historic values.
So what about this notion that a guy like Robb Ryerse, he's trying to make the Republican Party the grand party again, but all that again language, all that old, this is the way it used to be. There was a time, whether you take it all the way back to Lincoln or even post-Reconstruction or anything like that, that people just say, well, it's not that anymore. Yes, it used to be, but now the people you're talking about, those are called Democrats. We've just swapped that out. How do you respond to that? Because I hear that argument quite often. As someone who used to be a Republican affiliated person and now find myself as a Democrat. So what about that argument? How do you approach that?
Yeah, that's fine, and there's people that have made the shift and have decided not to be associated with one party or the other. Ronald Reagan used to crack the joke that when people would ask him about being a Democrat, he would say, I didn't leave my party left me.
Yeah.
And so, everybody who feels that way has to make a choice of how they're going to respond and what they're going to do. And, publicly, we've seen people like Joe Scarborough, recently who registered as an independent and left the party.
Right?
I think there's some of us that are wanting to not abandon, what could be a good thing and walk away. And I would even, I might challenge you a bit.
Please, yeah.
Certainly there are progressives in the Democratic Party. I would say that you're real hard pressed to say the Democratic Party is actually a progressive party.
That's a great point.
The establishment of both parties, whether Republican or Democrat, and especially those that are beholden to corporate interests, are going to consistently put the desires of the party ahead of the needs of people, and that's true in both parties. So I'm involved with this group called Brand New Congress.
Talk a lot about that. That's really exciting. This Brand New Congress move. It's brandnewcongress.org, something like that.
Yeah, brandnewcongress.org. Yeah. So one of the founders of Brand New Congress was on Rob Bell's podcast, and it went up on Inauguration Day in January, and my wife listened to it, and I came home from work that day, and she held her phone out at me, and she's like, "You've got to listen to this. You've got to do this." And the thing that she heard about with Brand New Congress was this idea that we can elect a president, and it's important that we be engaged and elect good quality presidents. But at the same time, we also have to do something about Congress, because if it is equally as important as who the president is how our Congress represents us. So there's a group of politically minded people who started this organization called Brand New Congress, and the vision is to run dozens, if not hundreds, of candidates around the country, in all across the country. Regular people, not career politicians, who are willing to put the needs of people ahead of the party establishment. And the big thing with Brand New Congress is that it's a post-partisan effort. It's a recognition that really the parties don't do a good job of representing us as people, but we've got to just very pragmatically and realistically, we've got to work within the party structures.
Right.
If we're going to make any kind of progress. So we've got Brand New Congress candidates like me, who's a Republican challenging a Republican incumbent in a very bright red district. We've got Democrats like my friend Alex Ocasio, who's running against like the third ranking Democrat in the House in the Bronx, because she believes that her incumbent, her representative, isn't doing a good job representing the people of the Bronx. And so, we're challenging the establishments of both parties and doing it in this post-partisan way, where I like to say, we're in different parties, but we're on the same team. And so it's, for people who get so frustrated with the partisanship and the divisiveness that exists in the country, Brand New Congress is actually a group of Republicans and Democrats and independents who are working together. It's the very thing that ought to give us hope as a country.
So describe that reality for a bit. Then, if you have people in Brand New Congress, or that would consider themselves to be a progressive Republican, and then some Democrat, what is it that separates those two parties and creates a distinction between being a Republican and a Democrat? If it's not the things that most people think of all the time, like, well, are you progressive or liberal or conservative or, isolationist or something like that? What is it that makes the Republican a Republican, the Robb Ryerse, and what is it that makes somebody else a Democrat?
Yeah. So, there's a number of very specific issues that we are on the same page. So, for instance, healthcare for all. We all of us who are Brand New Congress candidates, whether Republicans or Democrats, are supporting making sure that we fix our healthcare system once and for all. And that means that the acceptable number of Americans without health insurance is zero. It's not 24 million or 35 million or whatever. Like, the acceptable number of people who don't have access to health coverage is zero. Now, the distinction comes a bit in, I think we have different ways of getting there, and we have kind of different arguments that resonate with us. So for me, number one is as an evangelical, healthcare is one of these issues that, I see as a moral issue. I look at the example of Jesus, and you see someone who was consistently taking responsibility for other people's healthcare. You read the Gospels and that's
you're talking about like miracles and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. No, wouldn't that be great if that's but I mean, Jesus didn't say like, oh, well, it's not my responsibility, that you're sick. He actually took responsibility and consistently didn't blame, people who needed healthcare either. Like some of our elected officials do. So I come at it from, I think that's something that for me as an evangelical, looking at the example of Jesus, that resonates. But beyond that, I think there's really good economic reasons to support healthcare for all. So I think healthcare for all would be really good for our job market. So, I've got a friend who runs a business. He's a small business owner. And there's a regulation that requires that, once he hits 50 full-time employees, he has to provide health insurance through work for his employees. And so he is constantly kind of monitoring the number of employees he has to make sure he doesn't cross that 50 employee threshold, because as soon as he does, it's going to significantly cut into his bottom line. So the system that we have right now impedes small businesses from being able to grow. I don't think it should be that way. I think small business owners should be able to add employees and grow their businesses and not have the healthcare system be in a burdensome regulation on them for that. Or you think about startups and you think about entrepreneurs. I worked for a long time for a startup. And the biggest issue I had before I went to work for that company was, what are we going to do about health coverage? Because I was leaving a big company. And it makes me wonder, there's probably a woman sitting at her desk today, maybe right now, at
watching this,
big company. Yeah, maybe. But she's got the idea for the next great American company, she's got this idea. But she can't quit her job because that's how she gets her health coverage. Right. And she's got a daughter at home with a pre-existing condition. And you think about the things that have been so remarkable about our country, the businesses that have started, the innovation and the entrepreneurs that have been able to do really amazing things. The system currently actually impedes that. And so I look at something like healthcare for all, and I think it would be better for our economy. It would be better for small business. It would be better for entrepreneurs and startups if the system actually worked for the most people possible. And so I think, the distinctions between Republicans and Democrats come in how we get to where we've ended up.
I like that a lot, but I'll tell you, what I hear from a lot of people is, and I've been hearing this over the last 10 years or so, this big push. You know what? There's no difference between the Republicans and the Democrats. They're all the same. And for some reason, there's this passion in our country to want to have really, really clear lines between the two choices, right? And this idea that, well, you can have people in Congress that are about the same thing with different approaches seems to miss a little bit of what a lot of people want or say that they want, sort of imply that they want, with much more dramatic differences. It's like there aren't two parties. There's just one with two different approaches. How do you and other people in the new Congress think about those impulses? Am I reading that right, or do you see it differently?
Or there's actually maybe 7 or 8 different parties disguised as two. It's not that there's one. It's that you've got there's all this talk right now about the fight between the Steve Bannon wing of the Republican Party and the establishment. Right, and I would argue that there's this growing group of us who are progressive Republicans that are a part of that discussion as well. There's this, and then you've got on the Democratic side, you've got a lot of discussion going on right now between the relationship of the establishment Democrats and more progressive Democrats, the Bernie-crats. and what that looks like. And then, you add libertarians and Green Party folks into that. And then you see all of a sudden that there's actually a lot of diversity, and there's weird places where we connect. Because I would make the argument that there's a lot of people who call themselves small government conservatives who aren't really small government conservatives. They're social conservatives, but they are more than happy to use the reach of big government to enforce, what their morality is. If a small government conservative is, would be someone who would want the government out of our bedrooms and out of our bathrooms. But it seems like the very people who campaign on the idea of being a small government conservatives are very happy to have, the government involved in, who you get married to and what bathroom you can use and, how much the government can listen in on our phones and all that kind of stuff. So I think there's a lot of hypocrisy, but I think there's more diversity than just the two parties. I think we actually probably have 7 or 8 different parties. They're just kind of housed within, this two-party system.
Yeah. I think you're onto something. What do you think it takes now that you're in the candidate mode, right? Which is its own thing, right? Trying to help people to see you and to see your issues. You must be experiencing people's lack of interest, general apathy, not enough proficiency or time to become proficient in the arguments that are nuanced to make a difference to you. As a candidate now, what are you seeing that would be helpful for your average person to do or to engage in order to be engaged as a more informed political participant?
Yeah, I think one thing. There's 2 things. One is, and this is something that is, broadly, in our culture, I think is a problem, is that we've really got to get out of our echo chambers. It is so easy for people who are liberal to watch MSNBC and listen to the podcast they listen to,
like this one, I hope.
Never hear anything that, listen to Pod Save America and never hear anything that they disagree with. And it's in the same way, it's easy for conservatives to watch Fox News and listen to Rush and read certain websites and, never encounter anything that's different. And then when we come together and we try to have discussions, it's very, very difficult to do that. And we see that in social media and,
they're almost different dialects, aren't they? If you think
in
cultural anthropology,
around our Thanksgiving tables, it's going to be, it's going to be difficult. So the first thing is, read stuff you disagree with, it won't hurt you. It won't hurt you to even, I have, typically 4 news websites that I read frequently throughout the course of the day. I'm going to Drudge and the Huffington Post and Fox News and CNN, and I'm getting and it's always fascinating to observe what stories are being covered in different places.
Totally.
And you can, but nobody's objective. I mean, that's the other thing is we need to give up the myth of objectivity. Nobody's objective.
Right.
So, stop thinking that anybody is, because nobody is. Everybody's got an opinion. So I think that's one thing, is kind of get out of the echo chamber. I think the other thing that I would encourage people is to get involved. And I'm gonna sound a little bit like a Republican when I say this, but because I am one. But the things that we struggle with in our political system, the things that bother us, whether it's the way campaigns are financed and the role that corporate donors and special interest groups have in our political system, whether it's the blind partisanship that really bothers a lot of us, whether it's the divisive and toxic nature of how we engage in our politics, all of these things that bother us, we don't have to wait for the government to solve those problems. We the people have far more control over that stuff than we realize. We have far more influence. So if we don't like the way campaigns are financed, we don't like how our politicians are bought and paid for by their corporate donors, I don't like how my opponent is completely beholden to his two biggest donors, then you know what I can do is I can run a campaign that doesn't take any corporate money and doesn't take any PAC money, because, you know, and we the people can support candidates who are not beholden to our those corporate interests, and that, you know, $27 that people could donate, or, you know, $25 or $27 or $2,700, like that actually makes a huge difference in campaigns like mine and other brand new Congress candidates. We actually can do something about it. We don't have to wait for campaign finance reform to get passed. We can elect people who are going to put the needs of people first. We can actually, you know, not fall prey to the blind partisanship, and support people. You know, get to know people and not prejudge them based on the letter after their name. We can actually have good and healthy and robust and civil conversations with people, and come to, you know, conclusions where we agree, you know, and not have to fall prey to the toxic nature of things. That there's people that have a vested interest in keeping us divided. We, the people, have far more control, far more ability to influence that stuff. We don't have to wait for somebody else to solve the problem. We can do it today.
Thank you for that. How do you respond to the what seems to be the condition of so many people, that they just don't care, right? Like they kind of don't really, it doesn't impassion them, either because they've decided it's just never really going to change, or just not really my thing, and I'm going to kind of sit it out. It feels like there's a movement in our society that more and more people use phrases about things being political as a negative, and that you use that to insult something or someone. It's just so political, right? And so people rationalize why they shouldn't care about things. Do you experience that are you experiencing that as a candidate? And if so, what do you do about that? And what's your advice for people like me, who's currently not a candidate? Pagitt Ryerse 2020.
Yeah, I like it. Right. I like it.
To someone like me who cares a lot about this stuff and wants to get other people to care about it, but they just don't seem to care. Do you have any, you know, as opposed to the frustrated one who's shaking their fist like, I want to do something, what can I do? The people are like, I'm not doing anything. Maybe I'll vote.
Yeah, it is tough, and I'll tell you what's, you know, as you describe that, it reminds me a bit of my wife. You know, I'm someone who's always been, you know, super interested in politics, and you know, have, you know, we'll keep track of things, and we'll stay up late on election night to see what's happening, you know, in House races on the West Coast,
like a God-fearing American does. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's just that, you know, it just, you know, has always been super interesting to me. And she's someone who, though, you know, very engaged and always votes, has just never been all that interested, and has kind of had that sense of like, you know, why even bother? You know, it's the game feels rigged, and it feels like too much. That's why it was so interesting when she learned about brand new Congress. It was the type of thing that actually gave her, what she describes, it gave her hope for the first time. And I think people disengage because it feels very hopeless. It feels like, man, this is pointless to even be involved in any of this. And so, you know, finding those places where you can plug in and feel like, you know, you're making a difference and you're moving things forward, like that goes a long way to giving people hope. And so, I think, you know, brand new Congress is that thing that, you know, I've had so many people say that to me, that, you know, that this is the first time they've felt hope about our political system in a long time.
Yeah, I think you're onto something. You know, we tend to have this attitude that first you get people to care, and then you show people a path of action. But for a lot of us, it kind of works the other way, right? An opportunity presents itself, new products in a store, or a new movie in the theater, or a TV show comes on, or a new neighbor moves in next door. Then that action, that opportunity, all of a sudden makes someone care about the movie or be interested in the product. That sometimes the over complexity of trying to get to people's thoughts and emotions first before giving them a pathway of something to do. But those of us who are involved in life change for whatever reason, whether you're a therapist or a school teacher or, a trainer at a gym or a pastor or anything, you realize, just give people a chance to start doing something and they'll probably start caring about what they're doing. So Steve Bain on Facebook here just wrote a little comment saying a lot of people back out of politics because it just feels so overly complex. They don't know where to start, so they just give up because it's not something they can figure out. How have you found that as a candidate? Have you found it to be so complex? Like, I'm sure there's people watching this right now. They're thinking like, how in the world does some guy even decide to run for Congress? Like, what do you do? How do you even begin to do this? How complex is it to get yourself in the system if you literally wanted to be a candidate and not just a pundit or a bar stool commentator?
Yeah. So I think that depends on the level of where you're jumping in. Mm-hmm. So, I wouldn't be running for Congress if it weren't for Brand New Congress and the support that organization has given me. This was not something that was on my radar. I woke up one day and, minding my own business, and I went to bed that night thinking, I might run for Congress.
Yeah.
And without the support of BNC, this isn't something I would be doing. However, I do have friends that are running for local office right now. And because they are so fed up with the way things have gone. And so I think, the complexity is, it's complex. And frankly, the incumbents and the party establishments have made it hard for regular people to do this. It's really hard for, I co-pastor a church. I have a full-time day job and I'm running for Congress. And, so it's a lot of work. And I joke that, I don't watch Netflix anymore. That's, I just
you're way behind.
I don't have time to do that. So, I would say is, I think kind of even jumping back to, what we were talking about previously too, is I think that people have, what we could call like passion fatigue.
Yeah.
I think that there's that we are unendingly bombarded with like, drop everything and care about this. Drop everything and care about that.
Right.
And, and you scroll through your Facebook feed and there's 18 really great causes that, now need to, capture all of your attention. And I think people get exhausted by that.
Yeah.
And my encouragement, especially, from a pastoral perspective, is for people to focus in on like, what's the one thing you care about? And like, let's focus on that. Let's do that. And if we all focused in on like the one thing that we're really passionate about, the one area where we really want to make a difference, we're going to be able to make a pretty big difference. And if somebody's one thing is different from yours, that's okay.
Right.
We don't all have to be passionate about the same things.
Yeah.
So, I've got friends that are really passionate about refugee care and have devoted themselves over the last couple of years to that, and it's amazing to be on the front lines and watch them do that.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. And then I've got other friends that are, care about adoption and care about the healthcare fight and all sorts of different things. And it's great to see people get engaged in those different ways. And I think it's what we've got to do is rather than constantly pressuring people to be passionate about something new, let's affirm what they are passionate about and encourage them to get plugged in ways that make a difference. Now, hopefully everybody who's watching, Robb 2018 will become like their new passion, and they can plug in and be involved in this. But what I think is we've got to recognize the fact that, even within the political system, there's some people that are passionate about healthcare, other people that are passionate about the environment, other people that are passionate about immigration reform, and that's okay. Not everybody has to be equally worked up about every single issue.
Robb, if people want to know about this Brand New Congress approach, can they get there through Robb2Bs2018.com?
Yeah, you can get to Brand New Congress's website from Robb2018.com. And then also brandnewcongress.org is the other place to learn more.
How many votes? I ran for the state. I ran for the nomination to run for the state legislature here in Minnesota, and I didn't get the nomination, and so somebody else did. So I like to say I was like Hillary Clinton in 2008, in 2010 when I ran. I didn't even get the nomination, so I didn't technically lose. I didn't even get into the race, and there was a definable number of votes for the state legislature. It's the what I was running for the House in Minnesota. It's the smallest constituency of elected office you can go for, half of a city and part of another city and this kind of thing, right? So we knew the number of votes that it takes to get elected. In your situation in Arkansas, 3rd District, do you know that? Do you know, because you're going to have to win the primary. Is that right? You're trying to primary the current Republican candidate. Do you know how many votes you need, and how many people do we need to move into northern Arkansas for you to win this election, November 2018?
Yeah, I've got a friend who's a former CFO at a major company, and he's early retired, and so when I began thinking about this, I tasked him with, hey, I need you to figure out what the number is.
Yeah.
And the reason that's important, and the reason it wasn't just super apparent, is because this seat has been held by Republicans since the 1960s. And my opponent has never had a primary challenge. And so being able to figure out how many people are going to vote in a Republican primary in a midterm, we had to kind of back into the number, because there's we can't just look, 2 years ago, X number of people showed up in this election, because my opponent has never faced a primary challenge. And before him, there weren't, the Democrats haven't even run somebody against him the last 2 elections.
Really?
That's how bright red my district is. A Republican is going to be elected from this district. There's some districts that are just going to elect Republicans. There's some districts that are just going to elect Democrats. I always say, Montana, a Republican candidate can body slam a reporter and still get elected. And in Georgia, Democrats can spend a record amount of money on a congressional race and still lose, because because of gerrymandering and other factors. Yeah. There's some districts that are just either bright red or dark blue. And this is one of those bright red districts. A Republican is going to win. It's either going to be me or my opponent. The real race is in May. So I say and we've got an open primary here in Arkansas.
So people need to move. They need to move to Arkansas in May, not wait until the fall.
And Northwest Arkansas, I call it the best kept secret in the country. It's fantastic.
By the way, I'm just kidding about moving people in. You're not trying to preload the district. No. How many people?
So we have a number, and if there's high voter turnout, we think we know what the number is. It's very unlikely that there'll be high voter turnout, and so we're shooting for something. So what I'm trying to do is,
you're not going to tell me the number.
No,
I love that. Okay, that's great. I'll take that.
But we do have a number.
But it's not an insurmountable number. I mean, it's not.
I'm running.
Yeah, this is what I'm getting at. Is that for a lot of people who don't know, there's a fiction about how many people it takes to sort of move to see and understand your positions on things to make a difference, and it's more reasonable than a lot of people think.
Yeah. So I have a friend who's running in Miami. He's a brand new Congress candidate. The incumbent in that seat is retiring, and so there's like 15 people that are running for the seat now, like 3 Republicans and 12 Democrats. The Democrat primary is winner take all. And so with 12 people running, you don't have to get 50% in the primary. It's winner take all. He could win the nomination with like 3,000 votes.
Yeah.
In Miami, it's the numbers. We think our number probably is bigger than that here. Mostly because there's not a ton of candidates. There's just me and the incumbent. But yeah, so it's a doable number. It's a number that we thought that, we can if we can attract pragmatic independents and Democrats who, because we have an open primary, can vote for me in the primary.
So you're trying to motivate. So you're trying to motivate independents and democratically minded people who typically don't have anyone they would even vote for because there's not a candidate even running in some of the elections. You're trying to engage those people in the political process who've been left out.
My opponent is someone who, over the last year, has made a lot of people in our district really unhappy with the stances that he's taken in the things that he's done, and frankly, the way he's conducted himself in town halls and in other situations. And there's people who want to see him not be reelected. And my argument to them is the best way to beat him is to do it in May rather than November. That's our best chance. And then what we're trying to do is we're trying to attract what I call social justice evangelicals.
Yeah.
There's a lot of evangelicals out there who care about the environment. They care about immigration. They care about healthcare. They care about refugees. Yes. And they have not heard their elected officials talk about that. And a lot of them are Republicans. They're pro-life. They've grown up in Republican homes. They've grown up in church. But they just haven't heard the issues that they care about talked about, especially by their Republican leaders. And so I'm trying to motivate that group, especially, their younger social justice evangelicals, say, listen, here's a chance to have someone who's going to represent you and care about the things that you care about. And then the third thing is we just recognize that there is a strong anti-establishment wave that is kind of crashing across the country right now.
Yep.
You see that with the rise of Bernie Sanders in the Democratic primary. You see certainly in the president's election. You see that there's just a lot of people. There's a really strong throw the bums out kind of movement right now across both parties. And if we're able to tap into that as well, and recognize that we've got these elected officials that are bought and paid for that aren't representing us, and the president was right that we need to drain the swamp. Mm-hmm. But again, we don't have to wait for him to do it. We can do it by electing people who are actually going to represent us.
I hear this all the time about people who are in Congress, especially because people who don't keep track of all this. Congresspersons have to run for re-election every 2 years, and that tends to put them on a cycle of needing to fund their campaign on a perpetual basis because it takes a while just to run a campaign, so you're always fundraising. Is that true for you, and is that true for other people who this year or in coming years will start thinking about running for Congress, that you really have to be a good fundraiser? It just simply takes big money. Bernie Sanders is right, and everybody else, it's all big money. The only way to do it is to have big money, and without big money, you can't possibly even consider running.
Yeah, unfortunately, yeah. There's
that was not the answer I was hoping
a couple
for.
Of there's a couple of lessons that I've learned since I've begun this candidacy. And one of the things that I've learned is just how pervasive and how corrupting money is in our political system. I'm a lifelong Republican. Republicans typically, in the past haven't cared about things like campaign finance reform, but I've become absolutely convinced that the reason the biggest problems we face as a country don't get solved is because we have elected officials who have had their campaigns funded by huge corporate donors that have a vested interest in things staying the way that they are.
What's that money spent on? For people who don't know, so if it takes a bunch of money, what are some people literally think that Congress people take the money and put it in their own bank account. I know, some people maybe in Alaska do that, but they're not. They're not literally. The bought and paid language is not what they're doing with the money. They're not renovating their kitchens. What does all that money go for?
So my opponent, as an example, has a political action committee and has a campaign committee that takes in donations from, and then that campaign committee and political action committee can make donations to other people who are running. So it's very likely that the chairmanship of the budget committee is going to come up, and people can Google this and read news reports about it. And my opponent is in line to become chairman of the budget committee. And there was it was either the Politico or the Hill, I can't remember which, had an article a few weeks ago which talked about how he is in line to become chairman of the budget committee because his donations to other Republican candidates and the Republican National Committee have put him in line. He's essentially using the donations he's received to buy a chairmanship of, one of the most powerful committees in Washington. That is absolutely not the way things ought to run and things ought to be. So the money gets used to for the corporate donors buy influence, and they buy access through those donations, and then the candidates themselves are able to expand their own influence and their own power by doling out that same money to other people that then are now beholden to them.
So you're saying that
it's a terrible system.
So you're saying that a congressperson might be able to take money they receive, use that to ensconce themselves more deeply inside the Republican system in Congress, and by doing that, the rest of the system then comes around and supports that person, allows them to do the kinds of constituency benefits that they want, and that's the delicate ecosystem that they're using to prop themselves up. They're not just buying TV ads and full color flyers that are being sent to someone's house. There's something at a whole other level going on.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of it does go towards, those types of campaign things, but again, why does my opponent need $1.5 million in the bank when he hasn't had an opponent in the last two elections?
Right.
He's never been primaried. He hasn't had an opponent in the last two elections. Why does he need $1.5 million in the bank in Media Market 101? Well, it's because he can use that money to further his own political career within Congress.
That's insightful right there. I mean, I think a lot of people don't know how that works, and I think that's helpful for people.
Yeah. And it's really discouraging. It is. I mean, I have that sense of wow, we have got to fix this, and that's why, if we want healthcare to get fixed, well, we've got to elect people who aren't beholden to the insurance companies and the pharmaceutical companies. If we want immigration to be fixed, if we want the environment to be addressed, if we want if we have problems with Wall Street bailouts and things like that, we've got to elect people who will put the needs of people ahead of their corporate donors, and that means not just voting. Frankly, it means kicking in $5, $10, $20, $27, $2,700 to campaigns like mine and other brand new Congress candidates. Because it's the only way that it's possible for us to make a difference. So, I mean, I've raised about $15,000, which is, it's a drop in the bucket compared to my opponent. But hopefully we don't need a full campaign apparatus. In the age of social media, we can run a much nimbler campaign.
Yeah, there was a presidential candidate that tried to run as not, as sort of a different kind of a Republican and didn't have much of an apparatus. And
ended up spending, on a per voter basis, much less than his opponent. Yeah. And pulling off
Donald Trump, my friend.
A victory that, none of us saw coming.
Yeah, and wish hadn't happened. But yours, on the other hand, is the one that we did wish would happen. What day in May is this primary election?
May 22nd.
May 22nd. What day of the week is that? Is that like a Tuesday? Is it some Saturday?
It's a Tuesday.
It's a Tuesday.
No, it's a Tuesday.
So the primary is on Tuesday, May 22nd.
Yeah.
So friends, if you want to support Robb Ryerse for his new Congress bid in the 3rd District of Northern Arkansas, this is your day to do it. I'm proud of you. Good for you. Really glad
Doug.
Really glad you're up to this.
I appreciate talking with you, and I appreciate you giving me the chance to chat with the folks that watch your show, and I appreciate your friendship and your support. You and I had conversations as I was kind of getting started with this, and I've it's fun to see those of us that are we didn't even talk about evangelicals in the political system, but it's not just we need to not just take our party back as Republicans. We need to rescue evangelicalism as well.
Yeah.
and certainly the Roy Moore stuff in Alabama this week and some of the poll numbers.